why outcomes have improved is that now patients get diagnosed correctly, at least in the United States and other places as well, by raising awareness, by the patients organizing themselves.
Welcome to Believe in Progress, the American Association for Cancer Research Foundation podcast. Join us and be inspired by the incredible stories of those who have faced cancer with strength and resilience, and the medical professionals who are working tirelessly to find new treatments and ultimately a cure. Believe in Progress isn't just about the science of cancer. It's about the human side of this disease. Together, we can make progress in the fight against cancer and bring hope to those who need it most. Welcome to the Believe in Progress podcast, brought to you by the American Association for Cancer Research. I'm your host, Mitch Stoller, Chief Philanthropic Officer at AACR. Today, we have an inspiring episode featuring two remarkable individuals dedicated to the fight against rare kidney cancers. Joining us are Katie Coleman, a software engineer, podcaster, author, and stage 4 cancer survivor, and Dr. Pavlos Msaouel, a physician scientist specializing in kidney cancer research. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and hope to our discussion. Let's dive into their stories and the innovative work being done in the field of rare kidney cancers. Katie and Dr. Msaouel, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us and Believe in Progress.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So, Katie, I was wondering if we could start with you and just if you would talk to us a little bit about your cancer journey, your diagnosis, and kind of what brought you to being a cancer advocate as you are today.
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a long road and kind of lots of turns along the way. But I was initially diagnosed in December of 2020, where in the ER they would end up finding about a 12 centimeter tumor on my right kidney and what would end up being about 15 or more tumors in my liver. We didn't know exactly what it was at the time, but we were pretty confident that due to the spread to my liver, it was likely stage 4 kidney cancer at that point. And so I originally lived in Utah at the time. So I originally started off at the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Utah, where I went through a series of diagnostics. We got an MRI to look at the liver lesions a little bit better, and also did a biopsy, because there was some suspicion that from my initial report that the tumor could have been an oncocytoma, which is typically known to be a benign tumor that typically never spreads, because I had a large central scar in the middle of my tumor, which is kind of iconic for oncocytomas. And so there was a chance that if the lesions in my liver didn't end up being metastatic spread, that this could have just been a benign tumor that we could have removed and I would have been okay. When I underwent the biopsy, we found out that the cells in the kidney and the tumor in the kidney matched the same as the tumors in my liver. And originally it came back as a unclassified oncocytic renal neoplasm. But basically they said that this thing looked exactly like an oncocytoma, which is typically that benign tumor, except it spread to my liver. So it clearly was not benign in my situation, which is what gave me a stage 4 diagnosis. So that's typically not supposed to happen with oncocytomas. And so it was presented to me that I kind of had a rare type of kidney cancer. And there were a couple different options that it could have been in my differential that came in my pathology report. One of them was chromophobe kidney cancer. And so I started learning as much as I possibly could about oncocytomas and chromophobe kidney cancers as I was leading up to my appointment to find out kind of what the best treatment options would be for me. I initially was offered an immunotherapy at my original institution, but they made it very clear that this was very rare. They hadn't really seen a tumor like mine before. And so I didn't have a medical background or any kind of medical training at the time. So I tried to take in as much information as I possibly could. There was some hints that I might not respond to immunotherapy based on the fact that this tumor looked similar to chromophobe kidney cancer, and chromophobe kidney cancer can be less likely to respond to immunotherapy. So I ended up going for lots of second opinions due to the rarity of the situation and trying to find out what treatment option might work best for me. That led my husband and I to ultimately end up moving down to Texas to go to MD Anderson in Houston, where they did understand the biology of my disease a little bit better and offered me a different treatment option to start on, which was a targeted treatment. I started on that, was on it for about 2.5 months before eventually, through this process of learning more and more about my situation, I eventually got put in touch with the National Cancer Institute, where they ended up having seen another case like mine before, were willing to offer surgery, which wasn't really on the table kind of anywhere else at the time. And so we ended up doing a very aggressive surgery in June of 2021, where we removed my right kidney, did about 5 wedge resections of my liver, burned 10 tumors in my liver during that procedure. And then a couple months later, we went back and ablated a few more that were left behind. And since then, I currently have been off all treatment and currently have no active cancer, just on active surveillance. So bit of a long process to get to that point. And I know it can be kind of a confusing journey for how much I had to hop around, which is kind of common with patients that have rare cancers, because you really have to be an advocate for yourself and pursue kind of who may know best about your disease. And so Dr. Msaouel was my oncologist that I ended up eventually switching to at MD Anderson, who understood rare cancers a little bit better as well too, and has been instrumental not only in my treatment plan, but also helping me learn about rare kidney cancers. He does an excellent job of sharing information and making sure that it's accessible. And so that kind of all helped contribute to me eventually getting into the advocate space. It was the surgery that I was going through. We weren't 100% would help. We had hopes that it would be my best option, but it was pretty high risk, especially due to the fact that I had a bleeding disorder. There's a major blood shortage. So there was a million things kind of standing in the way of that surgery. And I made a promise to myself right before that surgery that if I made it to and through that surgery, I would dedicate whatever time it did give me to giving back and making things better for other patients from there. So that's kind of how, after surgery, I shifted my focus and have been advocating and doing various different option or advocacy items in the space afterwards.
Quite a journey. Quite a journey.
Yeah.
Dr. Msaouel, I'm curious what inspired you to focus your research on rare kidney cancers, and what drives your passion for the field?
Yeah, well, it's funny, when thinking about it like that. The straight answer is, how can I not be working on rare kidney cancers? It's such an unmet need. This is where somebody can make a big impact, and we can learn about research and understand the biology of cancer in ways that can help people with both rare and common diseases. To put it more into context, what happened was, honestly, when I was an oncology fellow at MD Anderson, it just happened that I rotated in the clinic of Nizar Tanir, my mentor, who also has a passion for rare kidney cancers. And he really infected me with that enthusiasm about rare diseases and rare kidney cancers, with a particular focus on what was the deadliest of the kidney cancers. It's called renal medullary carcinoma, abbreviated as RMC, that happens to be perhaps the only cancer that I'm aware of that so specifically affects a minority, young individuals of African descent, who usually in the US, they're African Americans, because they're more likely to have a blood disorder that otherwise does nothing else, essentially, to your body, called sickle cell trait. So 3 million African Americans have this sickle cell trait in the United States, and 300 million people in the world have the sickle cell trait, and they're all at risk for this highly deadly kidney cancer, RMC, that once you get diagnosed with it, if you don't get the right treatment, your average survival is 3 to 4 months. So 3 to 4 months from diagnosis for any stage. There is no, stage 1, stage 2. It's all the same. And to make it even worse, the average age is in their 20s. So you get this young, otherwise healthy, wonderful, potentially productive members of our society get afflicted by this cancer that was largely invisible at the time. And you feel this urgency to do something about it, which is what we did. So we created a rare kidney cancer program that focuses on RMC as its case study. And we have been able to make an impact. The median survival, meaning the average survival by 2018, was about 13 months, which meant that still about half of the patients would survive to a year, less than a year from diagnosis. But today, the median survival through these research efforts have improved to at least 18 months. We're getting to 2 years. So we've doubled the median survival through these efforts. And the majority of these patients will now survive beyond a year from diagnosis. And some of them up to 10%. It's not enough, but it's a number, are rendered disease-free. This is a cancer that was thought to be unbeatable 5 to 10 years ago, and that is no longer the case. And the beauty of making that focus is that paradigm, those ideas, can help other patients who have different seemingly diseases, and Katie is one of them. So that's the beauty of and the interconnections. There are only certain ways through which cancer cells can evolve and can behave. So what we learn from one rare cancer can actually help much more than just the patients with this rare cancer.
And are you learning about these things through clinical trials and activities like that?
Absolutely. So research is quintessential. And exactly as you said, the first thing that we needed to do when we started this is, hey, we need, first of all, in order to develop the clinical trials, they have to be driven by biological knowledge. We cannot just experiment, thoughtlessly. This is very important. And so we developed the models. We developed the cell lines in culture. We developed the animal models. We collected the tissues. We analyzed the tissues. We understood more and more of the hallmarks that drive RMC as we understand the hallmarks of cancers like Katie's tumor more and more. And by doing that, we started opening trials to show, and so we have activated and completed 3 investigator-initiated clinical trials for this kidney cancer RMC, where there were 0. We're opening the 4th one in September. I'm actually going to present it in a few hours in the meeting that I'm on right now to get people more and more excited. So 4 out of nothing since 2017, 2018. And what this shows is, first of all, clinical trials for rare cancers are feasible. You can do it because, a lot of people would advise back when I was a fellow and I said, hey, this is going to be my focus, would say, hey, this is the equivalent of career suicide, for an academic because you're going on your own with this difficult situation. But it's not. It's feasible. We can do it for this cancer. The outcomes are improving. I'm going to show them today and tomorrow to the academic world. And the same exact thing can be done across other malignancies. If you don't push, if you don't advocate, if you don't work with the biology, this is not going to move. And a key aspect, we were just discussing this earlier this morning, is we never assume that these clinical trials are going to be all positive.
Right.
They don't have to be positive. We have to be prepared for whatever happens. If they're positive, as some of them are, great. If they're negative, we're prepared by doing research, analyzing tissues, blood samples, etc., to understand why and inform the next generation of clinical trials. And through this iterative process again and again, that's how the outcomes.
Yeah. Isn't it true? I've heard this from other scientists. Isn't it true that you learn a lot from your failures as well?
You learn much more from your failures than successes.
Right.
It's information. It's exactly as you said. Information is surprise. That is the definition of information. When you're surprised, if when things happen that you don't expect, as long as you know how to process them and you're ready for them, you learn so much more. That's what you said is so correct, because that's one of the things that we're actually now trying to teach high school students about, because we want them to get to STEM, get to science, create the new generation of scientists. And very often the mistake that happens is that people look at the curves that we have at RMC, the successes now, and think that it all was success, 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 success. No. Under the hood, there is a lot of so-called negative results that actually can help us learn more and more and more, as long as we're ready for them.
I love what you're saying about high school students here at AACR. We have an initiative going to get more high school students to learn about science, the importance of science, so we can get that next generation of researchers, cancer researchers, not just cancer, but just really start promoting the science world. Katie, was it challenging to actually find Dr. Msaouel? I mean, how did you actually make that connection? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was kind of a process to where he became my oncologist specifically, but finding him originally wasn't that hard as a patient. And as I mentioned, he does a really good job of making sure that information is accessible and available.
Yes.
That has a big part of it. I mentioned as I was leading up to my very first appointment back when I lived in Utah and was going to Huntsman Cancer Institute, how I was trying to understand what my treatment options might be, questions I might need to ask or think about. And I had this very weird tumor that didn't really seem to fit any classifications. And this is also demonstrates the power of how one rare cancer can help other rare and common cancers. Is in that process, I was told that I had a rare kidney cancer. So one of the first things I did when I couldn't find any information just through regular resources on an unclassified oncocytic renal neoplasm, I ended up typing in and searching for rare kidney cancers. And there happened to be a webinar that Dr. Msaouel was on that was titled Rare Kidney Cancers and Renal Medullary Carcinoma, which meant even though it was a presentation mostly on RMC, there was a section that covered chromophobe kidney cancer and some of the other rare kidney cancers in the process. There was one slide in particular that I remember that had all of them lined up and talked about how different the biology was in every single one of these rare cancers. And so I was able to tease out that they were all kind of different from each other and responded differently to treatment. And then when the slide came up about chromophobe kidney cancer, it discussed how chromophobe is less likely to respond to immunotherapy. There's still some patients that can, but that you really needed to pay attention to each case individually and to kind of determine what the best treatment option may be because of that scenario. And so when it came time for my very first appointment with my oncologist when I was in Utah, I had all this context in the back of my head and kind of was asking questions around it of if immunotherapy would be the right option for me. I had had a bleed during my biopsy. And so we originally were going to do an IO-TKI combo, but due to the risk of bleeding, it was possibly being suggested of just immunotherapy. And since I knew chromophobe was still in my list of differential diagnosis, because I had access to my own reports, that is kind of what all led me to pursuing second opinions and looking into what other options may be available. I originally, when I went down to MD Anderson, I just called the general line because I had no idea how to book an appointment or how the systems worked at the time. And so I was placed with another oncologist initially, and she is absolutely brilliant as well too, but didn't specialize as much in the rare kidney cancers. So eventually I switched and ended up with Dr. Msaouel, but she was also instrumental. I believe the two of them probably even talked about what my initial treatment option was as part of tumor board or something like that as well too. So it was kind of a roundabout process, but that's why I personally feel like it's so important to make sure that this information is accessible and out there, and why something as simple as a webinar. I think a lot of times these days people focus on metrics, how many views certain things are getting, and some of these webinars don't get crazy numbers of views in a lot of cases, but they do have information that can change somebody's life. And so that is what I think is, I really commend Dr. Msaouel on doing, is because he has done a lot of these things, which made that information accessible to me, even though, again, it was originally a presentation highlighting RMC that had all of these other ones tied into it. So it's the importance of how these things can really complement each other.
Dr. Msaouel, you're at MD Anderson. An old friend of mine was a scientist there, a doctor there, Dr. Wang-Ki Hong. Do you remember Dr. Hong?
Wang-Ki Hong's photo is in my office, and I see that photo every day. He was a great mentor of mine. He believed in our RMC work when most people did not. When I was being told that this could be academic suicide, he said, nope, you keep pushing, you keep persisting and guiding. So I remember him very, very well. I wish he was here to see what is happening in RMC and other kidney cancers right now. Perhaps he is watching, and regardless, he is very, very, very missed.
He became a great friend of mine, and we did some things together, and he basically became a mentor of mine, and I've gotten to know his family quite well. We honored him at the AACR annual meeting, and it was amazing, Dr. Msaouel, and I'm sure you're not surprised how many people came out to pay tribute to this man. So it brings a great smile to me to know that he meant that much to you. Could you chat a little bit about the work that you've done, the clinical trials that you've done, or what you're going to report right now? Is that changing treatment options for patients? These new impact studies you're doing?
Absolutely. Before we started all of this, people believed that for RMC there was only one type of therapy, what we call platinum-based old school chemotherapy, and that was it. And today we have, and that's in the NCCN guidelines, a second-line therapy after the first-line therapy, the platinum-based chemotherapy. We have a third-line therapy as well that also works, and people are going to find out this week that now we have a fourth-line therapy as well. So, yeah, this is truly making an impact. And again, that acceleration of research, because I'm going to show a graph whereby you can literally tell that, yeah, things are moving. Like, no matter what happens, as technology is moving, things will progress. Cancer outcomes will progress. However, we can make it much faster by supporting research and by advocating for research. And you can see how, once that happened with RMC, for example, literally, if the curve continued the way it was, what is happening today would have happened in 2030, around 2030. So that actually means that there are people who are alive today with this cancer because they got these therapies that were meant to come at 2030. Because they were able to get it, they're alive. Otherwise, we would have lost them.
That's great. Let's chat about advocacy for a minute, Katie. I'd love to learn more about some of the work you're doing with the Oncocytic Tumor Alliance, but also the Rare Cancer Research Foundation. And tell me a little bit about what your goals are and the kind of work you're doing for both.
Yeah, so I started the Chromophobin Oncocytic Tumor Alliance last year. And part of the reason why I chose to create it, there was a number of factors that went into play with it. One was originally, I mentioned there was a period of time we thought I could have had chromophobe kidney cancer. And so through that process, I connected with a group of other young women who were all diagnosed with chromophobe kidney cancer all around the same time. And we all started learning together about the very limited research in chromophobe kidney cancer at the time, and its limited response to treatment. If it ever does spread in the metastatic setting, it's less likely to spread than the other types of cancer. But when it does, it can be less likely to respond to the treatments that exist to it. And that all goes back to the fact that all these kidney cancers, each subtype is very different from the other ones from a biological standpoint. And so we were all asking the question of why is no one researching this? Why isn't anything happening? And there was a young woman that had started that was diagnosed around the same time. Her name is Catherine. She had started a research grant for chromophobe kidney cancer that was patient-led. So basically, myself and this group of 5 other young women kind of all banded together to help fund the first ever patient-led chromophobe kidney cancer grant. And so we funded that in, I believe it was under a year, where we funded. It was $50,000 for the first grant. And that was in efforts with another organization that helped kind of champion that. And so it was the first time that I saw that it really doesn't take a large number of people to make a difference in these spaces. It just takes dedicated champions for it. This was along the same period of time where I was watching what was being done in RMC. When I was initially diagnosed, I didn't hear RMC that often. I did in that webinar, but I hadn't heard it kind of all over the place. And about a year and a half later, I was attending the IKCS, which is a kidney cancer symposium put on by the Kidney Cancer Association. And there I ended up hearing 3 presentations about RMC. And I noticed the progress that was being made and how much of that was likely due to having fierce champions for the disease. I saw the same thing happening with HLRCC, which is another rare type of kidney cancer. And so I kind of decided that I was going to create a nonprofit so that there was a dedicated resource to be able to do the exact same thing. We needed focused efforts to be able to help patients kind of organize around this effort beyond just kind of organizing beyond a grant. Let's make sure that we can put the steps in place so that we can band together in a coordinated effort. And so I ended up starting the Chromophobe and Oncocytic Tumor Alliance. And the main efforts right now are focused around chromophobe kidney cancer, because that's the one with the most need to move forward for treatments and research. And then I ended up joining the Rare Cancer Research Foundation last year. And that was kind of a serendipitous event that kind of ended up happening at ASCO last year, where the weekend before ASCO, there had been all this talk about how do we move research forward for rare cancers that I've had with various people, and seemed to see a lot of the same blockers and hurdles in moving research forward. But there was kind of just a lot of talk in a lot of these things. And so I wanted to create something that made it easier to start moving things forward. So the weekend before ASCO, I ended up creating a resource that consolidated pretty much everything that was known about chromophobe kidney cancer all into one place. So it was all of the institutions that had labs that were studying it, every paper that was kind of highlighting where the current research was, where the cell lines were, any cohort that had ever existed for chromophobe kidney cancer, and what the response to treatments were, to make it easier to find these things. Because it took me.
Website, by the way?
What was that?
Would people find this on your website?
Yeah, so this one is under medresourceconnect.com currently. It's transitioning over to the Rare Cancer Research Foundation. So it will live under the Rare Cancer Research Foundation here soon. But I created this resource. I actually pushed it live in the cab on the way to ASCO. And so I was sharing that with the Rare Cancer Research Foundation and sharing how we needed to be able to create an easier way for people to research these rare cancers. Let's kind of consolidate this information, as well as a whole bunch of other infrastructure issues that need to be solved there. And I kind of almost ended up offering me a job on the spot there.
I'm sure.
So over the next few months, we kind of worked out the details, and then I ended up joining the Rare Cancer Research Foundation just because we were so completely aligned. They had already set up a lot of infrastructure. They help patients donate their samples from, say, community hospitals, or really kind of any hospital in the US, if they have a rare cancer, to the institutions that are studying them, while that tissue is still fresh. And so kind of made perfect sense to team up our efforts here to kind of help move things along together.
Starting a nonprofit organization is no easy task, by the way. And so
Yes.
Congratulations, and I applaud your efforts to do that. Dr. Msaouel, besides funding, which we all know is always something that we're always striving to raise more money to fund cancer research, what other challenges do you face, running your laboratory, being an oncologist? Again, knowing money drives research, drives science, but I'm just kind of curious what other major challenges you have.
Yeah, and Katie has just been an amazing advocate for patients. She really, really digs deeply into everything, both her condition and other conditions. She understands the challenges. That's something that her and I discussed, which, exactly as you said, is not just funding. It is also, for example, raising awareness. RMC was completely under-recognized, underserved. People would not even diagnose it correctly. So a big change, a big aspect of why outcomes have improved is that now patients get diagnosed correctly, at least in the United States and other places as well, by raising awareness, by the patients organizing themselves the way Katie described, and that's what the RMC patient advocacy community did, and then advocating for themselves and saying, hey, check extra. Don't just call this kidney cancer. Go deeper. What type? Each type is treated differently. So raising awareness is key. Another thing is, beyond funding, again, open collaboration. And here is, a nice connection with AACR, because it was last year at the 2023 AACR Kidney Cancer Conference, right, whereby we first got the opportunity to present where we are heading with RMC for the first time. And we did something else. And this is actually in the public domain, published in Cancer Research, the AACR journal, as an abstract, as part of that, as part of that conference abstracts, whereby we've set openly, transparently benchmark goals. We said by 2025, we're going to get the median survival of patients with RMC to 2 years. And by 2030, we're going to get it to 5 years. And by having those milestones, we are held accountable to ourselves, to our patients, to our funders, etc. And what I can tell you, initially when we first presented that, the community of folks that were in the AASR conference were initially, what is this? What is this saying? But then we actually presented the data and they said, this is actually feasible. And now today, even earlier than 2025, we're going to present the data in the conference I'm at right now. We're going to show, because this is going to get published in the next few weeks, we're essentially there. We've gotten to the 2-year survival, and we are on a trajectory to get to the 2030 goal of getting the survival to 5 years, with the one overarching goal of eradicating RMC and every other cancer.
Well, it's wonderful to hear you talk about and setting bold milestones, because not everybody does that. And to me, that's quite inspiring in my role of trying to always consider raising money for all different types of research. So I think that's phenomenal. It really is. So Katie is also an author. And I understand a book is coming out here very shortly, Too Young for Cancer. Katie, tell our audience a little bit about, what went into the book, the inspiration for it, and a little bit about it, and how people are going to be able to get it when it goes live.
I was thinking about that the other day. I've been, I'm approaching 2 years since I initially started writing that. And it's been an evolution of writing it. I initially decided to write it because there was so much. I shared my entire cancer diagnosis through social media because when I was initially diagnosed, I was 29 at the time and getting diagnosed at stage 4 without a great prognosis or an unknown prognosis. I had no idea what to expect. And I really wanted other people to kind of have more information than I did. So I wasn't sure how things were going to go, but I wanted to share that process along the way. But so much of that was missing a lot of the context of kind of everything that was happening behind the scenes, and kind of the internal struggles that I faced a lot of times as a patient, how difficult it was to navigate these systems, as well as what led up to me getting diagnosed. So it took me about 1.5 years to actually get diagnosed while I was pursuing various symptoms. And so I share kind of what that process was like leading up to getting diagnosed. And then I took readers, I guess, through the entire process of each step of the way, the hurdles that I ran into. And also for me personally, because I had such a rare cancer, I have no active cancer currently, but there was a period of time that we were watching my disease, and that we had to watch it to even say that I had no active cancer, because I do still have a few spots in my liver that are all very small, but have not changed over several years. And so I really struggled to process all of those things, because there's nothing like talking with another patient to understand that you're not alone. When people think that you should mentally be okay after maybe the first couple of weeks as you've gotten through your diagnosis, all of the well wishes kind of fall off and you're just kind of in the thick of treatment, people think that you can kind of just get on with the process. And I really wanted to show the behind the scenes of the ups and downs that comes with all of that, that it's not a linear path. As well as the power of these communities that really not only help patients move along through the process, but were also how I got to the National Cancer Institute, how my treatment options changed. It was the power of a community that made that happen for me. And so I really wanted to share the behind the scenes of what that was like in the memoir. So it comes out in November, and it can be found at katiekickscancer.com/memoir. And all of my portion of the proceeds of that book are being donated back to research. So I donated my book deal, and all the proceeds that will come from that, as well as like any speaking engagements or anything that come from the book, all of that goes purely back to research. So support definitely helps there.
Well, we will certainly promote the book, and it'll be in the show notes here. Dr. Msaouel, you must be very proud of Katie. I can tell that and we've only just met 40 minutes ago, but I can tell you, you have a special place in your heart for your patients. And I get a sense that patients play a very pivotal role in your work.
They definitely do. They inspire us, motivate us, give us great ideas. So Katie is definitely an example of a person that, without having formally a medical background, always comes up with interesting ideas about every aspect of medical care, cancer care, whether that has to do with, risk factors, interesting connections worth exploring, therapeutic approaches. Perhaps we can think about this aspect of metabolism, or perhaps we can think about X, Y, and Z. And of course, the organizational, the advocacy aspect, like how can we use these new technologies that are emerging, communication technologies, etc., to amplify our forces, amplify our research, communicate the clinical developments to the whole world, to the community of oncologists most efficiently. And the same happens with so many other of our patients. Some of the coolest ideas that we have explored, let's say for RMC, came directly from our patients. They come up with interesting ideas that we explore. Again, they don't always pan out. That's the point of science. It's you're going to get, results that are negative or whatnot. But you learn. Literally, I had this week, and it was after, the hurricane happened in Houston. As soon as we got back power, I was at a RMC patient advocates meeting. They have every 2 weeks, they have a meeting where they gather and they talk. And as Katie exactly said, I, as a physician and a scientist, I may know just about everything known to medicine and science about RMC currently. But there is one key aspect that I do not know at all, which is what does it mean to be an actual patient or an actual caregiver with these cancers. This is why this complementarity is so important. And when the patient advocates, ask, hey, can you come and answer some new questions that we have as things develop? And that's the beauty. When there's progress, there are more questions to be asked. I said, yeah, let's do it. And so it was supposed to be a 1 hour meeting at 7 p.m. We ended up finishing at 9 p.m., where once again, they had this, very interesting ideas, very interesting connections. Some of them I could literally check in real time. Others, we're still working on.
Well, first of all, that is pretty cool. And I think it's really cool that you're open-minded to ideas. I don't think everybody is that open-minded and perhaps can learn something from your own experiences. Last question for you both. And Dr. Msaouel, you've already answered it a little bit with some of what we talked about, but I always like to ask my guests about the role that mentors have played in your professional and personal life. And so, Katie, you could maybe start with that, because your journey is a very interesting journey, a professional and a personal journey, and just kind of curious about that, about mentorship.
Yeah, I think mentorship is huge. I wouldn't have learned pretty much anything I know currently without mentorship. One of my very earliest mentors was actually a former boss of mine. He was a founder of a startup that I worked at in my early 20s and throughout my 20s. And he's actually written into the book in a chapter where he helped me learn the importance of two things. And this actually played into my actual, how I navigated my diagnosis as well, too, is I remember he gave me the advice one time of that nobody is ever going to be as interested and as passionate about things that are important to you as you are. So it's your job to make sure that you advocate for them and make sure that you are moving things forward that are important to you. And that advice was some career advice I was getting at the time, but it also tapped into nearly every aspect that I have used of my life now, because it's all about finding those things that if you're passionate about something, you can't sit around and wait for somebody else to do something about it. Right. You need to help move those efforts forward. And so he is still a mentor of mine that I appreciate greatly. But I've also had various mentors just trying to navigate the space after my diagnosis and learning about disease, although I don't know I would call official mentor, but I've learned so much from Dr. Msaouel, from his presentations and even from information that he has helped teach me throughout this process, because he is very open-minded. And so I think whether you have official mentors or you have people that you look up to and learn from, I think they are crucial in the development of anybody in their personal life or making an impact in any type of advocacy or scientific role.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Msaouel?
Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough the value that mentors and teachers have in our lives from early on. You know, the easiest example is starting, in school, in middle school and early in high school. I wasn't doing that great. I was getting the feedback that I am a do nothing, and I was in that path. I clearly was in that path. And it so happened there was one particular teacher, one particular mentor. His name was Yanis Kourelis. And somehow, I don't know how he got to me. He said something to the effect that, hey, what you're doing is, the equivalent of having all of these, farmland in Thessaly, in my native country of Greece, and just doing nothing with it, just letting it die. And, I don't know why it got to me. The way he said it, the way he framed all of this just got to me. And I got a love from him about science, almost like that, like about physics initially, and then biology, and then medicine. And then I had mentors like my PhD advisor, Michael Koutsiliaris, who was the one that said, hey, why don't you go to the US, as a sabbatical to just do some cancer research there, get some of the technology there, and then come back. And I went, to Mayo Clinic with Eva Galanis, another great mentor. I did not even intend to do oncology. And, she said, nope, you're going to end up being an oncologist. And she was right.
Here you are.
You can't say no to Eva Galanis, I guess. And then, she was the one that said, hey, why don't you think about maybe training in the US for residency in oncology? I've never thought that I would do this, that I would make a life for myself in the US. And here I am. And I told you already about Nizar Tanir. He's the one that, gave me all of this passion for kidney cancer and rare kidney cancers in particular. So yeah, mentors are key.
Well, I can't thank you both enough. That I've so enjoyed doing this podcast. You both inspire me. You both have wonderful passion and energy and are clearly making an impact. Dr. Msaouel, I wish you the best of luck with your presentation today. I know you're going to knock it right out of the park. And Katie, I can't wait to get a copy of the book, first of all, but can't wait to really read it and dig in. It's going to be a huge success. I'm confident of that. And you two are just bright stars, and anything we can do at AACR to continue to promote and help you with all your missions, and we're here to do that. So thanks so much for giving us some of your precious time today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. I've really enjoyed this chat and conversation.
Thanks.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie Coleman and Dr. Pavlos Msaouel, for sharing your invaluable insights and the impactful work being done in the fight against rare kidney cancers. Your dedication and collaboration are truly inspiring. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of Believe in Progress podcast. If you want to learn more about Katie's advocacy and Dr. Msaouel's research, please visit katiekickscancer.com. That's katiekickscancer.com. Remember to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode, and share this podcast with friends and family, lots of friends and lots of family, to spread hope and awareness. Your support is crucial in the fight against cancer. Please consider making a donation to the American Association for Cancer Research at aacr.org. Every contribution helps advance life-saving cancer research. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep believing in progress and the power of collaboration in the fight against cancer. This podcast is produced by College Cast LLC, and don't forget, cancer research saves lives.